Welcome to Lunchtime Topics. I am Kate, the Director of Programming and Communications here at the Creative Coast in Savannah. We are a 501c3 nonprofit that exists to catalyze the innovation economy here in coastal Georgia. And we achieve this through both social and educational programming. And Lunchtime Topics, what you're watching now, is a bi-monthly educational program. And we feature a business expert on this bi-monthly podcast. And this business expert shares their wisdom with the startup community and entrepreneurial community. And I'm so excited for today's guest. She is here to talk with us about setting goals and how to achieve them for lasting and fulfilling results. Shannon James, she is a seasoned team leader, consultant, coach, writer, and facilitator. She has a wide variety of clientele, including C-level leaders, small business owners, and solo entrepreneurs wishing to up their game or seeking a richer, deeper experience of life. She has over 25 years of experience, including 16 plus years as owner of Shannon James LLC. She's guided individuals and teams around the world to get lasting results by closing the gap between where they are and where they want to be. Her passion is helping business owners, solopreneurs, and teams get clear on what success means to them, and then empowering them with practical tools and proven strategies to create real results and enjoy both the work and the life they love. So welcome, Shannon. We're so glad to have you here today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Caitlin. It's great to be here. I appreciate you having me. I'm looking forward to talking about why resolutions and goals don't work and what we can do to be more effective with them.
Great. Well, we'll just dive right in then if you're ready. And can you tell us a little bit more about your background and history?
Sure. Yeah, I'll give a bit of my own personal and professional story. So I started out in the corporate consulting world after I graduated Georgia Tech. And even then, I was really seeking to have a great life, not just a great career. You know, I wanted to be able to enjoy the fruits of my labor throughout my life. So I turned down offers from several big six consulting firms. I went with a boutique consulting firm in Atlanta. And I did that because I felt that they valued a bit more balance and they were working with a lot of the same clients. And so I did that for 4 years. And it was a great starting point, but I ultimately wanted more meaningful work. So fast forward to me taking a senior producer role at WebMD. And that was because I really felt passionate about health and wellness, something that was near and dear to my heart after a challenging illness during time serving in the Peace Corps in Africa. So 10 years into all of this, I had a great career. I was working with a great team at WebMD, a lot of professional success, a lot of accolades, but I was really struggling in that full-time plus kind of corporate environment to have both the life I was envisioning and the work I loved. I could be asked on, a Tuesday afternoon to be at our New York office on Wednesday for meetings, and I was just expected to drop everything and fly to New York. It didn't matter if I had other plans, or I was racing triathlons at the time, and something as simple as taking a longer lunch break for a workout, something that I personally find to be energizing when I can work that in a few times during the week, was very difficult to do in that particular culture and work environment, as it is with many. So I proposed moving to Savannah. At this time, I was still working for the corporate headquarters in Atlanta. And so I was proposing something that was very out of the box at the time. This was early 2000s, and I proposed working 100% remotely. And they agreed. And so the agreement was I would come to the Atlanta office at least once a month. They would fly to New York still as needed. And I did that for over a year before I ultimately left to start my own business, Shannon James LLC, which I did again with a goal of having more of that work-life balance. And I really am pleased with what I've experienced. There's been a lot of challenges over the years. So that's 17 years ago when I started Shannon James LLC. And in my first year out on my own, I managed to not only triple my income, but I had 8 weeks, so like 2 months of vacation time. I had a lot more free time for time with family and friends. I was able to be more intentional about setting up my workday in a way that worked better for me and still worked well for my clients. So while there have been challenges over those years, I've really never looked back. I've continued to stay focused on personal and professional goals and priorities. And I feel I can truly say I have a life that I love, that I'm doing work that I love. work that's meaningful, that is changing the lives of the people that I work with and bringing real results to businesses and the businesses they work for and they own. And so that work is, as you mentioned, been everything from working as a consultant in the role of a VP of product with a startup based in New York and Toronto, to working with individual solo entrepreneurs and freelancers here in Savannah, Georgia, and just about everything in between.
Yeah, wow. So what a background. I feel like that what you're talking about is so relevant, because for me personally, when I started, when I was freelancing for the first time, finding it was that rush of okay, I need to take on clients so I can make money, but suddenly there was like that lack of personal time. So I had to learn how to better balance my time and set these goals that you're talking about. And I think this is applicable to so many entrepreneurs who are starting out for the first time or striking out on their own, especially in this climate of this switch and, the great resignation, as some people are calling it, where people are going out, striking out on their own. So I'm just excited to talk about that a little bit more, but also, okay, let's talk about the title of this, because we talk about why resolutions don't work in the title. So can you elaborate on that? Why not resolutions?
Yeah, for sure. And I'll say that, number one, I'm a huge proponent of lifelong learning and personal growth, professional development. So, and I'm in the business of helping clients get results, whether on an individual or a business level. So it's not that I'm, anti-resolutions or goal setting. It's just that I'm not a big fan of the way that most of us go about them. And that's because the way that we set resolutions, the way that many organizations set goals, are not actually working. They're not getting the results. And there's not a lot of evidence that they work in the way that most of us approach them. So just to share a few stats that I pulled together, stats show that over half the US population sets resolutions, but only about 8% of those who make resolutions succeed in achieving them. So it's a pretty low number. And then within that, Forbes magazine says that 64% of resolutions are abandoned after the first month. So in another week and a half, the vast majority of those who set resolutions will have already abandoned them. And yet on the flip side, we also have plenty of data that shows that setting specific goals makes you much more likely to achieve them. I've seen stats that are as high as you're 8 to 10 times more likely to achieve your goals than if you don't set goals to begin with. And so then the question is, what gives between those? And in my experience, I think you have to go back to why it is that we're setting goals, why it is that we're setting resolutions in the first place. And we don't tend to do those on small things, right? We don't set business goals that are small. Hopefully, we're setting something that's a bit of a reach or a stretch, where we're making resolutions on big things, things that we think will ultimately maybe change our lives in some way, or things that are really important for our business that'll help us make a pivot or take things to the next level. Maybe it's going to increase our earnings or help us to work with a different type of client. So they're really big priorities. And I think there are a few reasons that we tend not to succeed. And the first is that anything that's really big, it's going to take a lot of smaller steps over a longer period of time to get there. And that's really hard to sustain unless we have some sort of a system, like habits every day, our work habits, our personal habits, that are specifically geared toward taking those small daily steps, taking those smaller actions that are going to move you forward toward the bigger thing that you want to accomplish. But that's not the only reason. That's a big one that I see, and I think that can trip us up. Another reason is that the bigger things are naturally harder to accomplish. Maybe it's something that we've never done before, or that our team has never done before. It's going to require more thought, more strategy, more planning. And so there's the natural question of, where do I start? And so a lot of things don't get off the ground. We've resolved to change a number of big things at once. We're setting ourselves up for a bit of overwhelm. And we've made maybe some unrealistic or big resolutions without any plan to achieve it or any strategy. So we haven't really set ourselves up for success. I know so many clients who've had, a manager say, okay, these are the 3 things I want you to do this year. basically good luck, go figure out how to do it, right? And there's a big gap between outlining those things and then having a clear plan that's likely to succeed, to get there. And then the third reason that I see, and this is a big one, and it's a little more subtle sometimes, is that when we're resolving it has to do with the size and the importance of the goals. And so when we are making these big resolutions or we're setting these big goals, it's probably is life-changing in some way. Maybe it's something that to us, we really want in our career. We want to set up this particular kind of workday structure. We want to finish working at a certain time. We want to work with a certain type of client. Maybe we want to be a great manager or leader, or maybe we just want to get really fit and run a race, run a marathon. But with all of those, if we fail, then it's something that hits us at a deep level, right? It can hit us at the level of our identity. And so it's often easier not to start at all. We might come up with a lot of reasons of why we're starting, but at a deep level, I think that's why the stats show that almost half the population in the US never even sets a goal or a resolution to begin with. It's that fear of failure that, it's very scary. It can hit us at that level of identity. But of course, that's counterproductive, because if we don't start, then we're never going to succeed in the results that we're after. And, the risk is that we're leading lives of complacency, right? That we aren't making the most of this one very precious life that we have. So it's not that resolutions are a bad idea. And I'll leave it at those are three big reasons why they don't work. So it's just that most of us are not approaching our goal setting and our resolutions in a way that's setting us up for success. And in fact, we're not getting the outcomes that we're looking for, and we're often making things harder than they need to be.
Yeah, and that last bit, you talked about complacency, and that word does not strike well in entrepreneurship, because nothing can really be complacent in entrepreneurship. Like maybe for a little bit, but then something changes and you've got to set new goals. You've got to work towards something new. So, I can't think of anything more applicable to entrepreneurs than talking about setting goals and achieving them. So you talked about why not resolutions, and you mentioned a couple of things you could do, but what are some more examples of how we can do things differently? What needs to change so that we can get these results we're looking for?
It's a great question. And, I think that at the basic level, what most of us really want is that we want to know how to change our behavior in some way so that we're living and leading a happier, more productive, maybe even more fulfilling life, right? Something that's more meaningful for us in whatever way that we define that. And what I think it comes down to for most of us is two things, and there's a lot within these two things, but whether it's your business or your personal goals, one is the science of habits and mindset. So a lot of people talk about stories, what are the stories that we're telling ourselves every day? What do we believe that we can do? What do we believe that we can't do? And I think this is arguably the most important thing. And I'll talk about it more a little bit later, but our habits and our mindset are intricately tied together. And so those small steps I was talking about that we need to take that are ultimately going to lead to those big outcomes that we're after, the mindset that we're approaching that with and the daily habits that we have to support our success are really critical. And so that's something that most of us can stand to improve in some shape, form, or fashion. And then the second is strategy. And this is the other big thing I see is that often when we're reaching for that big goal, maybe it is something new that you want to do in your business, a pivot that you want to make, or a different kind of project that you want to take on, is that when we're reaching for something we've never done before, we may need someone that's been there before to help guide us. Whether we're working with a consultant or a coach to do that, or whether we're reading a book or seeking out information online through a blog or a podcast, we may need help with the actual strategy. We're trying to do something completely different we haven't done before. And in my experience, if someone's dealing with this, I could coach them to achieve a very positive, empowered mindset with habits every day that are setting them up for success. But if they don't know the practical actions, the steps that they need to take to get those results, then they're still not going to hit the outcomes that they're looking for. So those are the two big ones, mindset and strategy.
And I got to take this moment to mention that Shannon spoke back in 2020 at another Lunchtime Topic on building a resilient mindset. Also something that's important for entrepreneurship outside of not being complacent. But she spoke around the time that the pandemic hit, and we soon realized that, well, this isn't going to be a few weeks. This is going to be a lot longer than we thought that we're sheltering in place. Shannon spoke and talked about how, a resilient mindset and how to develop a resilient mindset. So I'm not going to link it here right now, but I will towards the end. And I encourage people to check that, watch that. That's on our website. So, okay. So,
and I think that just, if I could, while we're talking about mindset, and I appreciate you mentioning that, Caitlin, with our goals, like the mindset is such a big part. And one of the things that tends to get in our way, whether we're consciously aware of it or not, is that everybody has fear at some level of something, and so I think it's really helpful to just be aware of that and to even accept that, like, okay, maybe I have a fear somewhere that if I set this big goal, I'm not going to achieve it. And that might kind of shatter a dream somewhere that I had. It could be as simple as I want to get really fit this year and I want to start running these races, and if I try that and I don't succeed at it, maybe I'm never going to be all that athletic and I've just proven that I can't do that. Or it could be something as deep as, my identity as a professional, a leader, a manager, might really be shattered if I set out to do this thing and I don't achieve. And so I think from a mindset perspective, that fear of failure is there, right? And we all know that there's no way we can achieve big things without some level of failure, right? We all kind of know that, but actually doing it and allowing ourselves to fail here and there is something we'd rather not do. And so there's an interesting stat that I saw recently that said that for highly achievement-oriented, successful professionals, that the sweet spot is actually succeeding 60 to 70% of the time. And so if you flip that coin, that means that in some way we're failing about a third of the time. And we need to get okay with that, right? So fear is just one piece of mindset, when we talk about mindset and habits, but it's a big one for many of us. And I think it's just being conscious of, that whether we're conscious or unconscious of it, just accepting that there may be an element of fear here. And if you're not doing something you've set out to do, and you said you're going to go running 3 days a week because you want to be able to run this race, and you're just not doing it, assuming that you know how to run, there's probably some resistance there. And we want to kind of peel that back. And a lot of times we peel that back and we find that there's some fear hanging out somewhere that we just need to shift and then move on so we can take that confident action.
Yeah, it's that what if, like, what if it doesn't work out? And I think, personally, I've had experiences where people said, well, you're not going to be able to do this. Like, you don't have this or that to get that done. And I don't think people are necessarily like trying to be cruel, but I think maybe we all have that little voice in our head sometimes. Maybe we've heard somebody say that, or someone's doubted us. Maybe it was like something from our childhood. And I know that definitely creeps in sometimes, like where you just have to look past that inner voice that's like, oh, like that fear that you're going to fail and people are going to laugh at you or, mock you. I think that's where some of it is like people and what people think. And just you look at some of the successful entrepreneurs out there and they don't have ego. Like they have to just say like, I messed up, like learn something, on to the next thing, and like I hate to reference, but like, cause he's all in the news right now, but like, look at Elon Musk, no ego. He just kind of does it. And, not really fazed by what people have to say about him. He goes for it. So,
and I think you hit on something really important there. And there's a level of awareness. And there's just this kind of taking action into our fear, right? But as we're aware and we just say, okay, you know what? I'm a little afraid of this. It's a little scary. And I'm still going to move forward. Then you have a level of intentionality. And you also, with that intentional action, then you're able to put things in more perspective, right? And that often I see with clients and in my own experience, that we can make much more rapid progress toward our goals. And it's often a lot easier than we were making it before, right? When we were getting in our own ways and some level.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. So there's obviously intentionality. That's like a hot word around this time of year because you're setting intentions and then you have to be intentional when it comes to approaching these things. So can we talk about, first of all, what does intentionality mean and actually look like, rather than being just a buzzword that we hear all the time? And then what are some strategies that you advise for being intentional?
Yeah, it's a great question. And the definition of intentionality is being deliberate, being more purposeful. And so when we look at intentionality and tie that into, I always tie intentionality to action. So I'm a big fan of taking intentional aligned actions. And that really comes down to a couple of things. And the first is getting clear on what it is that you're going for, right? What are your goals as a professional? What are your goals for your business? If you're working with a client, I know for me, when I'm working with a team, it's getting clear as a team on what the goals are, what it is that we're working for, so that we can have that alignment, right? And that synergy. So, if it's personal, what is it that you're personally working to achieve? And so that's a big one when it comes down to being intentional and then tying intentionality to action, which is really the sweet spot, right? Because we can have a lot of good intentions, and if we're not then taking any actions to move in the direction of making those things happen, then it's just a nice dream, right? And so number one is really getting clear on what it is that's really important to you, what's most important to you and your business, what's most important for you to achieve for your clients, what's most important to you personally. And I like to set 3 big goals for the year. And then I have smaller ones behind those and when it comes to intentions. And then the second part of that, in terms of strategies for being more intentional, is that once you've taken the time to get clear on what's really important so you can take that intentional action, then it is taking that action that moves you in that direction, which sounds really simple and obvious, but these 2 things trip up more companies and individuals than, it's hard to imagine how often I see it. And what I see, the way that tends to present itself, is I see a lot of wasted action, a lot of people that are working long hours and long days, and there's even a lot of work product that's being produced, but it's not actually aligned with what's stated as the most important objectives for the year. And so maybe there are results that are happening, but the big goals are getting missed. And that tends to lead to frustration. It tends to lead to a lot of disappointment. It can lead to burnout, over time. And I think there are a lot of reasons for this, but a few common examples are that in a large organization or even in a team, there are usually competing and conflicting priorities. And so those need to be surfaced, and then people need to get aligned behind the goals, right? And sometimes that means some discussion around what the big goals are. And so another reason I see this not working is that there may be a change, and you alluded to this earlier, something changed, and we need to now adjust for that change. Right. So we need to accommodate that or adjust in some way. And maybe we need to go this way to reach our goal, as opposed to just straight ahead the way we originally thought. But a common one, and maybe the most common one, is that there wasn't that clarity and alignment to begin with. And that's so critical if you're being intentional. And it's not always obvious. It's, if you're reaching for something new, you may not know exactly what it is that you need to be doing. So,
trial and error, it sounds like sometimes.
Exactly. And I think that there's a strategy behind it too, which is, I alluded to in the habits and mindsets, which is if you're going to be more intentional and take actions to achieve more of what's most important to you, you need a structure that supports you. And that includes having, daily habits, personal habits, work habits that are going to support you making progress toward that goal.
So what are some habits that support intentionality?
So some habits that have worked for me and that have worked for clients, and these are things that I think it's ideal to cultivate every day. They're going to help you just go for it in life and live life more fully. The first is staying active. And this is a big one, taking care of your health by getting some form of daily exercise. It doesn't have to be grand. It doesn't have to be going for that run and racing that marathon. It could be 30 minutes walking every day, and you're not only going to feel better for doing that, but you're going to have a sharper mind, and you'll be more able to show up and be the person that you want to be. You'll be more of the leader in your own life. And that's something that I found over the years. I've always prioritized getting some kind of exercise. Maybe it was some yoga, maybe it's taking a walk, maybe it's actually going out for that run. But I know that when I get that, then I am going to show up refreshed, more creative, more awake and alive and on purpose. So whatever it is that you enjoy, getting some movement is a big daily habit to support success toward your goals. And the flip side of that, number 2, would be getting enough rest. So I like to say that sleep is my secret weapon, and it's not because I'm lazy. I work really hard, but I've always prioritized getting enough sleep. And the times when I fall back on that, or I slide back and I'm not getting enough rest, or I'm traveling a lot with a particular client or work project, and it's harder to get that sleep, I can see that my output suffers and the way I show up suffers. And so when we're rested, then we can be the person that's in that meeting or having that difficult conversation. We're showing up calm, we're refreshed, we're better able to come up with creative solutions to articulate what it is that we're trying to say, because we got rest. So number 2, big one, is prioritizing rest and getting enough sleep, whatever that means for you. The third one, and I've got 6 here that I want to share. The third is spending time in nature. And this is another one that can be challenging for us, especially for those of you that your work is in front of a screen. So you may be in front of a computer most of the day. During the pandemic, many of us shifted to doing Zoom meetings. I know I've been in situations where I had 9 and 10 hours of back-to-back Zoom meetings in a given day. And it's all screen time, even if we're looking at each other, right? We're still in front of the screen. And so there are countless studies on the benefits of getting time in nature. And that's for not only our psychological health, but for our physical health. It can regulate blood pressure. It can regulate stress. So getting us into that nice sweet spot of balance. And you can combine these things, right? You can make sure that the 30 minutes of exercise you're getting is done outside when the weather permits. Take a 30-minute walk outdoors, or walk in a park, or have lunch sitting under a tree. So it doesn't have to be, again, a grand thing, but for a lot of us, that's fallen to the side, and it's something, you can come home in the evening and have dinner and end up then watching television, and you're in front of a screen a lot, and you haven't taken even 10 minutes to just put your feet on the earth, stand under a tree, take a walk on the beach, get outside. The fourth one is sense of humor. This is a big one and a fun one, which is just learning to laugh at yourself and laugh at life. And, when we can keep that sense of humor, when we can set our egos aside, nothing really can touch us. We're able to just go through things. Even the challenges and hardships are easier when we're able to put it in the perspective, into a bigger perspective, and have a sense of humor. The fifth one that I want to share is mindfulness and meditation. So you may or may not be a daily meditator, or you may or may not have a mindful practice. But there are lots of ways that you can achieve this. And this, I believe, is really critical. It really sets people apart. It's something that I've done for 15, almost 20 years now. And it may just mean pausing throughout the day to take a breath, have 3 or 4 moments where you take a few minutes and you breathe deeply, you collect your thoughts, you gather your energy, and you center yourself. And that alone will make a big difference, if you're having a really hectic day. I'm a big fan of having a formal meditation practice where you carve out that time and you sit. Could be 10 minutes, could be 30 minutes, could be an hour. But having that practice that allows you to be more present and on purpose and alive and aware in the moment, it's incredibly empowering And it also helps us to show up as more of the leader or the manager or the business owner or the spouse or the friend that we can be. So finding something, it could be journaling, it could be meditation, it could be visualization, it could be deep breathing, something that helps you to get centered. And then the last one is getting support. And that's, a habit that may come and go depending on what challenges that you're facing, but finding a community that you can be a part of, like the Creative Coast here, where you've got maybe like-minded entrepreneurs in the startup world, in the technology space, people that you can talk to when you're going through a challenging time. It may be at certain points that you want to hire a professional, whether it's a consultant or a coach, depending on what you're facing. They can really help you get past your blind spots, improve your resilience, make a pivot in your business. So I would say invest in yourself and invest in your business, whether it's something that's free and open to you as a part of the community, or something that at times that you pay for. Finding a way to support yourself is really important.
So it's so interesting. A lot of these that you're saying, we also remind me of a talk that was done, gosh, I think it was at the end of 2020, by Dr. Pilksick, who also spoke at a Lunchtime Topic. And she talked about like how to stop your brain from being stressed, overwhelmed, and stay happy, right? And it was during the holidays, so it was a really stressful time when she spoke. And a lot of these things are very similar. It's, it sounds to me too, like not only you need these habits, but you need habits that are going to fulfill you and make you happy. If you're not happy and you're not doing these things, how are you going to get to your goals? You're just stuck in these ruts of doing the same, maybe your brain's neurotransmitters or whatever they're called are firing in the same way they always have. You're in that same old routine, and you need these habits to really, like you said, taking that walk is vital for getting your brain to be sharp. And I had a boss, I remember, who, speaking to that point, she would take all of her meetings on the phone and she would record them using one of those many apps out there, so she didn't have to take notes. And she would go walk. She would get outside and walk if it wasn't raining to take her notes, because she was in back-to-back meetings. And she, instead of doing Zoom meetings, she just started taking phone calls and said, I'll record it so we both have the notes, and I'm going to go walk. And the joke was at her office that well, she's not at her desk. Where is she? Where is she? We hear her on the phone, and she was out walking around the park at the near, just to get out and get some vitamin D. And so anyways, I love all those habits.
And they're really, doing something like that where I've done things like that too, where I've done, instead of a Zoom meeting, said, hey, can we just have a call? And would you mind if I walk while I talk, and we can record this, and finding ways to mix it up. It's not only going to help you enjoy the day more, but you're also building resilience when you're doing things that take care of yourself at just a fundamental level, right? And so then when those challenges come, one, you're less likely to get stuck. And when you do get stuck, you're less likely to get stuck for a long time, because you've already built up some resilience, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. So, okay, say you've been doing well, you're on track, and then all of a sudden something unexpected happens. Maybe you get sick, or you have a loved one that goes into the hospital, something that gets you distracted, you've fallen off track. Maybe it's something just as minor as you've just gotten distracted with something simple, because that happens more regularly than I think bigger things. So how do you get really realigned with your goals?
That's a good question. And to answer that, I'm going to step back for a minute and say that the first thing that I do when I'm, at the start of the year and I'm looking at goals for my business, looking at personal priorities, is that I set some limits around what I'm trying to achieve. And that's not to say that I don't set big challenging goals, but it might be that instead of having 10 big challenging goals, I start with 3. right? And so you hit on that, the fact that we do get distracted, and most of us are living very busy, full lives, and we've got a lot going on. And so if we want to do these things differently, if we want to set up some habits maybe that support our success in ways that we haven't been, in the past, then we've got to create some time for that. And I think one of the great myths of time management is that you can get it all done, right? And I think a lot of people say or allude to that in with a well-intentioned, an intention of being inspirational, right? And I think that if you're looking, certainly if you're looking for something like more holistic success, where you have both work that you love and enjoy and a life beyond that, that's more balanced, that it's important that we shatter that myth, right? That and that we acknowledge that we're limited resources. We're limited in the sense that there are 24 hours in a day. We're ultimately limited in the sense that at some point we're going to die, right? So we have this one sort of precious life, and we don't know how long we get. And so that means that we've got to be very intentional about the things that we are doing and the things that we aren't going to do. And so the first thing here is that I think being strategic in terms of how we're making our choices. How do we want to use our time, our limited and precious resource? And then how can we make time our ally by working more effectively and efficiently? And so that means deciding what we are going to do, and just importantly, what we're not going to do. And where I see a lot of times when people get off track, they've just gotten overwhelmed, like you were alluding to. They've got too much to do. And the things that are least important are often the small things that can take up our entire day or our entire month. And then we look up, and those 2 or 3 big goals we set, we kind of set those aside. And we said, well, I'm going to work on that maybe on Friday morning when I have some time. But then Friday morning got busy with something else and it didn't happen. So we're not leveraging our time each and every day to take action toward the most important goals. And so I would say, to go back to your question, then it's important to have a way that we're checking in. I like to do this daily, even if it's just for a few minutes. Just check in briefly with your goals, with yourself personally, check in with your team if you're working with a team. And this gives you a space where you can acknowledge, okay, we're off track in this way, and accept that that's happened. And that seems like a simple and obvious thing to do, but when it's a complex, say, technology project or a fast-paced product launch, it's not always obvious, and you can get way down the road and not even be aware that you're off track. So if you have a way to pause and acknowledge, okay, something isn't working, something isn't aligned, maybe we need to adjust course here. This gives you the opportunity to then address it because you've acknowledged it. And so that's the first thing, is have a check-in. Doesn't need to be fancy, in a way that you can recognize that you're off. And then the second is to look at what happened or what is happening and why. And that sets you up to be able to address it, right? And so if I'm working with a client and something's off track, one of the first things I'm going to do, let's say they set those 3 big goals, is we might revisit those and say, are those still resonating? Is that still what's most important? And what I'm trying to do is figure out, and everybody can do this, for yourself, is this more of a mindset / kind of habit thing, or does it need strategy? Is it something we don't know how to do? So, like I was working with a client who had a major product launch. It was critical to the business last year. It was what the business was all about. And in early testing, we figured out, okay, this is not actually meeting our end users' needs. They're getting confused. They're not finding this particular action we want them to take. So we need to pause, and we need to adjust our strategy, right? So we need to adjust the end results that we're going for in order to reach that outcome that we were hoping to achieve. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is that if we're not doing the things we said we would, but we know how to do them, then that's more likely a mindset or a bandwidth issue. Is there something that I need to get past, a fear, some resistance? Do we have the resources that we need? And so being able to acknowledge and see, have the space to see when you're off to track, and then to look at why it is, and sometimes ask the hard questions and have the difficult conversation. That's going to allow you to then find the solution that gets you back on track. But if you don't recognize it in the first place, and you could keep going for months and wake up, middle of the year and realize you've not gotten any traction on something that was really important to your business or to you personally.
Okay, so say in instances, and maybe the answer is similar here, what about when you have plateaued or you hit this hurdle and it's not so much that you've gotten off track, but you maybe those small goals that you set for yourself, maybe the answer is you come up and go back to the drawing board. But what happens when you're stuck and you want to get to the next level and you're working at it, but what's you've set for yourself isn't working? What are some strategies for tackling that?
It is similar in my experience in that, what I'm tending to look for is, okay, why are we stuck? And often getting stuck is more of a mindset. There's a fear coming up, there's some resistance coming up, and it's not even on a conscious level. So we may want to deal with that in some form. And this is somewhere where if you're stuck and you're not quite sure why, it can really help to talk to someone else, whether you hire a professional or whether you talk to a trusted friend or mentor, because they can help you see, something that may be a blind spot for you. Oh, you keep doing this thing, and yet you say this other thing is what's really important to move the ball forward. Why isn't that happening? So mindset is often something that needs to be looked at when we're just stuck and we don't know why. But it can also be strategy. I've seen situations where a company's trying to make a pivot into a new market, trying to make a big change, and they've never done this before, and the team members may not have experience in that particular space. So if it's more of a strategic issue, then ideally, again, you want to talk to someone or get advice to help you get unstuck. It may be that you're referencing a blog of someone or a podcast of someone that you like and trust. It may be that you're bringing in outside help, whether you're hiring a consultant, talking to a mentor, talking to another business owner who's been there and done this before. So you figure out how it is that they did the thing you're trying to do. It may not be that they did the exact same thing that you're trying to do, but at least they've done something similar, and you can learn from that. And I will add to that too, that, and this goes back a bit to the overwhelm, is that there's a lot of evidence. There's a tremendous amount of evidence that points to the fact that if you decide when and where you're going to do something, you'll do it. There have been studies done on everything from professional corporate environments to prison inmates that show, if you decide when and where you're going to do it, put it on your calendar. I'm going to do this thing this week. And not only this week, I'm going to do it Wednesday between the hours of 9 and 11 a.m. or whatever it would be. That if you decide that and you actually put it on your calendar, you're much more likely to do it. And if you don't decide when and where you're going to do it, then you probably won't end up doing it. So that also goes back to that getting stuck place is, you may have had this big goal, but did you actually take the time to plan time to take the daily steps or the weekly steps that you need to take? And did you put that on your calendar? And you might have had to say no to something else, or delegate to someone in order to make the time for that new thing.
So it sounds like some reconfiguring needs to happen.
Exactly.
And it comes to strategy, it's reconfiguring, exactly. Recalculating. So, okay, we talked a little bit in some of these answers, you talked a little bit about time management, and that's such a hot topic in our community because it's when you're running your own schedule and trying to prioritize, it can be a huge factor, right? So can you talk about how important of a factor time management is in intentionality and achieving goals?
For sure. Yeah. And like you said, it is critical. I mean, I think time management is really what it's all about. And it's one of the absolute keys to having lasting success and to having work and the life that you love. And, like I alluded to earlier, I think one of the great myths that's out there in time management is that you can get it all done. And I think it's really important that we get rid of this myth. And I'm not trying to be, a Debbie Downer about it. The reality is that we are limited resources. We have a certain amount of time in the day, and that's okay. We can accomplish great things, very inspiring people. When you look around in the business world, in your personal life, people are accomplishing great things in those 24 hours. But day to day, we do have some limits in terms of the amount of time we have, especially if we're going to prioritize some of those habits that are important, like getting enough sleep, getting, exercise. And so we need to really be intentional about what it is that we're going to do, and what are the things that we're not going to do, which is sometimes the harder side of that coin, right? Of learning when to say no. And I think there are a lot of well-intentioned people out there that are telling us we can have it all, whether it's inspirational coaches or speakers or something we see on television. But I think there's a difference in having it all, in the sense that, over the course of your life, you can achieve more than you ever thought you would. And you may kind of have that experience of having it all, like the help that you're looking for, the wealth, the level of financial abundance that you're looking for, the happiness and the fulfilling relationships and the travel and whatever else it is, the family and the lifestyle that you have with your family, the spouse or the boat that you want to get, or the car or the plane, whatever it is that success looks like to you. There's a difference in, over the course of our lives, having that and then having it all right now. If we set all these big goals and it all landed in our lap right now, most of us would probably be a little bit overwhelmed. And so I say all that to say that when it comes to time management, I think the first thing we have to do is to make strategic choices. How do we want to use ourselves as a limited human resource? And how do we want to use our time, those 24 hours that we have every day? And again, that doesn't mean at all to make your vision or your goals small, but it does mean being smart about it and deciding what you're going to do, and just as importantly, what you're not going to do. And to give a quick example in my own life, it may mean hiring help. So I know for myself that I reached a point in my business 8 or 10 years ago where I really needed a personal assistant. And I was kind of dancing around that. And part of me thought, well, this is a big expense. I can't really afford it or justify it. But the reality was that there was a lot of administrative work in my business, and there was a lot of stuff that other people could do, and that would free me up to do the things that I was really good at and the things that I enjoyed more. And so when I hired someone to do that, and I just started out with a part-time personal assistant, it helped me manage those things, and it really enabled me to take my business to the next level. I took a big leap in terms of income that year in the business. And not only that, I was enjoying my days more because I was spending more time doing the things that I was really good at, working directly with clients, helping people get results. And so I was really enjoying that time. And so I say that to say that, what happens in time management for a lot of us is that the little things take over, and we spend our days getting those little things done, and we're not getting traction on our big priorities and goals. And we keep pushing the time spent on that to next week or the next month. And so we don't write that book, or we don't take that course, or we don't do the marketing that we know we need to do in our business until we have the time. And that time is never going to show up magically, right? So we need to prioritize every day so that we're taking some steps toward our really big, important goals. And that goes back to a bit of what we were talking about earlier of breaking big goals into smaller steps. And once you have those smaller steps, then you can schedule those, right? So I'm going to do these 3 things today, or I'm going to do these 3 things this week, or whatever the time frame is. And then once you do those 3 things, then that enables you to take the next step, and you're continually building momentum. And while it may not change things overnight, over the course of 6 months or a year, you can have really experience outcomes that are beyond what you dreamed were possible in that time frame.
Yeah, what I love about what you said, when I started at the Creative Coast, I'd come from working in the medical field, and never had really an experience with entrepreneurship before, or any kind of mindset related to entrepreneurship. I was a very much straight A student in college and growing up. And I realized quickly when I started working for the Creative Coast and interacting with all these different entrepreneurs, and even my boss at the time, who had been an entrepreneur, that we move pretty quickly, and trying to achieve certain things. Not everything can be perfect. Not everything can be 100%. And, something kind of has to give, like you mentioned. Not everything can be that picture perfect. Something has to be sacrificed sometimes for the good of the goal. And kind of realizing that was huge for me back in the day. So I just had to mention that. That's so spot on. And then we've got about 10 minutes left. And so we got 2 more questions here. Okay, so today, what is your immediate advice for setting and achieving goals that listeners can take advantage of when they leave this lunchtime topic?
Okay, yeah, and I'll keep it short and sweet. So I think there are 2 things I would recommend. And the first is that structure that I mentioned early on. So if you don't have it already, creating a structure that for you every single day enables you to take action on those things that are most important to you personally, professionally, in your business. And so that's every day. And that structure may be having a planner system. I'm a fan of having a combo of an online calendar and also I use a bullet journal system where I'm actually writing things in a journal. And so you're having this time that you set aside every week where you plan what you need to do over the course of the week. And you're not just writing down a long to-do list, it's intentional and that it's aligned with those bigger, more important things. And to start, if you don't have a structure or the structure you have isn't working very well, you may want to revisit that and set your goals for the month to begin with, and then look at how you're going to break that down week over week for those big goals. And then put that time on your calendar where you're making the time for those things. And that may involve, what is going to drop, like you said, or what am I not going to do perfectly? I could spend 10 hours on this thing, or I could spend 2 hours on it. And so having that structure, and then within that structure, that's helping you with those distractions that we know now are massive, and they're daily and they're never ending. You may get 500 emails, you may get 1,000 emails in a day. That doesn't mean that you have to stop and respond to those immediately, right? Many of them are someone else's priorities. They're not the things that are most important in your business. And so, for me, I don't respond to email first thing in the morning. I don't respond to email throughout the day. I have 3 times during the day that I check emails. And I've been doing that for years. I started doing that, maybe 7 or 8 years ago. And, I've never had anybody say, gosh, Shannon, it took you 3 hours to respond to me, or it took you 5 hours to respond to me. You're not being responsive. It clears up time. So having a structure and having those habits that work for you. And if you don't have that, I'd encourage you to just take some time and look at what could you change to support yourself better going into this year. And then the second tool that I'd recommend as an immediate advice, and this may sound a bit out there depending on what your practices are, but it's visualization, and it's a tool for that mindfulness and that intentionality. I recommend a client spending 10 to 15 minutes every day visualizing what you want to achieve. There's a ton of science behind it. We hear a lot about it in the world of like Olympic athletes who, are visualizing success in their competition so that on race day, they actually do it. So not only are they exercising physically, but they're exercising their mind and their neurological circuits, right, to prepare. And the one tip that I would give on that very quickly is that you're not just visualizing, there's a lot of science behind this. You're not just visualizing what you want to achieve, but you're also allowing yourself to see an obstacle coming up, something that you're maybe afraid of or worried that will happen. If you're wanting to be a great communicator and you're envisioning yourself speaking, but then you might allow yourself to envision yourself stumbling over your words or getting lost in thought or whatever, and then you envision yourself overcoming it. So you visualize the outcome, you envision an obstacle, and then you visualize overcoming that obstacle so that you're still getting to those end results. So those are 2 things: having a structure that supports you, and that includes planning and setting aside the time, for time management purposes, so that you're taking the actions toward your goals. And then the second one is the visualization. And I like to ask at the end of my visualization to make it very action-oriented. What is the very next action I need to take, and when do I need to take it for this particular thing I'm envisioning? So it makes it much more practical, boots on the ground.
Yeah, I've heard that as well, that visualizing the steps even to get there, and like you said, the hurdles that you might experience and overcoming them. I've heard that as a popular way, not a popular way, but a scientifically proven way, like you said, to achieving your goals. That's so thanks for sharing that. I'm looking at the time, so but I always have to ask this at the end. Can you tell us a little bit about your individual services that you can offer, and then how people can get in touch with you if they want to work with you in the future?
Sure. So I offer results-based coaching and consulting, and I work with individual business owners as well as teams within organizations to help them close a gap between where they are right now and where it is they want to be. And a lot of that is getting those results faster. Ultimately, they may get there, it may take a few years, and I come in to help get those results more intentionally, more quickly for the organization. And I do it through two main ways. One is one-on-one work with leaders and business owners. So that's something that I do a lot. And the second way is partnering with client teams. So maybe the CEO brings me in to work with the leadership team, or the technology lead brings me in to work with the engineers and the designers to help them achieve a particular result. And so those are the two main ways that I work with clients. And for those of you that are listening to today's call or on the call today, if you're interested in talking to learn more about what I do and have what I call an initial strategy session, I'm happy to offer one of those complimentary. And the goal of that session would be to help you identify the next most important action to take to move toward your important goals this year. And I think, Caitlin, you've got a link that we can share with the audience if they're interested to sign up for that session.
I've shared that now. So thank you so much for that. And if you guys want to check that out, I've put it in the chat, and so you can click there. So we have a few more minutes. Want to see if anybody has any questions before we close out. I know I have one, big one.
Go for it.
Okay, so you talked about habits, and there was two that struck me because these are the two I struggle with: being active and resting. Okay, so I want to be active, right? So my mind can be sharp. And the only time in the day that I have is early in the morning. But I also have to go to bed late every night. So it's more of a personal question for you. And I think you kind of mentioned this, but what do you prioritize more, sleep or activity? Like getting out and getting active? Or if you can somehow slip back to being active in, how do you do that throughout the day? You kind of talked about it, but.
Yeah, I would say, rather than, if I had to prioritize one or the other, I would actually prioritize getting enough sleep, getting sufficient sleep so that you're not exhausted. If you're not getting enough that you're not exhausted, that comes first. But I don't think it has to be an either or, but it more than likely has to be looking at something else that can draw, or changing your idea of the activity. Maybe instead of taking a 30 or 40-minute walk in the morning, you take a 10-minute walk in the morning, you take 10 minutes, sometime in the middle of the day, and then you take 10 minutes once you finish working. So sometimes breaking it up into chunks is a good starting point. But I would encourage you to look at, is there something else that you might be able to cut to free up, say, 30 minutes during the day?